Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell, and today's topic is Conservation Connect, Nat Hab Year-End Conservation and Sustainability Review with Nat Hab's Chief Sustainability Officer and Expedition Leader, Court Whelan. Thank you so much for being here today, Court. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Brooke. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And as Court and I are going to chat with all of you. All right. We are going to stop sharing. Perfect. All right, Court. I think we should just begin at the top. What are some of the biggest wins in 2024 for NatHab sustainability?
Yeah, great question for starters, for sure. Gosh, there is a lot to name, I have to say. One of the things that is very, very much on my mind is the idea of decarbonization in the travel and tourism industry. This idea not just of offsetting or removing carbon, things that we're actively doing as well, but preventing it from being emitted in the first place. And when you think of that in tourism and in travel, it's like some of our main modes of doing what we do and getting around is via carbon emitting sources. It's from planes, boats, trains, automobiles, all those sort of things. And so while I still feel like we are in the very early stages, beginning stages of this idea of decarbonization, we've made some really, really good headway in laying the groundwork for future years with two new vehicles, new electric vehicles, I should say, in our operations. And one has been probably the most work has been integrating a vehicle in Yellowstone National Park. And this is a vehicle that can actually be used for any of our US national parks. This is a Rivian. So it's fully electric, it's fully battery powered. It's very much like a Tesla, but an SUV. And then the other is actually the newest one, just as a matter of a couple of weeks ago, a larger passenger van in Peru, actually. So this is
Wow.
really exciting. Yeah, it's fantastic to have those two. And while we have quite literally dozens more that we need to roll out in the coming years, we're learning as we go of like, okay, what are the minimum sizes we need? Let's talk about range of these vehicles. Who are the suppliers? How can we be creative with all this? How can we use electric vehicles? Maybe, like for instance, the Rivian that we have for Yellowstone is not a passenger vehicle for our guests, which trust me, I would love to have a 20-seater or an 8-seater, a 6-seater or whatever. But the reality is that technology really just doesn't exist yet in the US to allow for those extended ranges of like 300, 400 miles between charging stations. But nevertheless, we thought creatively, and we do have a operational vehicle, someone that goes ahead to check us into lodges and hotels, goes ahead to set up lunch spots and picnic areas, and gets bags to the right place, and more of like the logistics. And so that person, while they would normally be driving around, their own vehicle or own van, uh, gas emitting vehicle, being able to do that in an all electric vehicle is a really great step in the right direction. And as you know, I'm sure we'll talk more about what's coming online in 2025 and 26 and beyond. But this has indeed laid that groundwork such that we're already looking at vehicles in Kenya, Tanzania, possibly even Costa Rica, Alaska, elsewhere in the United States. So even though just a couple of vehicles, it's laying the groundwork and a pathway to some pretty big success in the future. So that's a big one. I started off with that because decarbonization, again, very much on my mind, and frankly, one of the more challenging things to do in the travel and tourism industry when you think about it. But anyway, we'll probably come back to that in a little bit. But let's continue on. A very close parallel is our signing on to Science-Based Targets Initiative. This actually happened at the very, very end of 2023, but most of the groundwork was laid in 2024. And I'll catch everybody up on what Science-Based Targets Initiative means. We're kind of staying on topic of decarbonization. In essence, so we call it SBTI. So you'll hear me say that. Science-Based Targets Initiative is a global group of experts as well as participatory organizations that are signing on to say we are going to decarbonize our operations by well below the Paris Agreement by the year 2030, meaning if we do all this right, if we decarbonize to a certain percentage and a certain level, we will reduce climate change to warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. And this is where the science comes in, and it's very, very nuanced and a lot of calculations and formulas and reporting and spreadsheets that I'm not going to go into here. But the idea is that we will be decarbonizing what's known as our scope 1 and 2 emissions, the things that we own. Some people refer to it as what you burn or what you buy. Like, so the emissions you burn in your vehicles or energy you might buy from the grid. That's like a very distilled down scope 1 and 2, reducing those by 42% by the year 2030, which is a really, really hefty task. There's a lot of work to go on that. There's a lot of technology that is still yet to come out that we're, anticipating going online in like the years 2026 and 2027. But nevertheless, signing on to that as one of the first travel companies, first ecotourism companies to do so, is a really, really big win. And we've been working very hard for meaningful progress. It's not going to be only e-vehicles. It's going to be sustainable energy at some of the camps we own and beyond that. So very exciting there. Another great one that I'm super happy about is sort of on the climate education side, and it's a program called our Carbon Clear Vision, as we're calling it. And really what it basically is you all in the audience can see this just by going onto our website and clicking on virtually any of our trip itineraries. You'll see a little label that says carbon data at the very top of the text in the page. You can click on that, and a little nutritional label, just like you'd see in the back of peanut butter or a cereal box, will show up, and it actually has essentially every kilogram of carbon emitted on the trip distilled down, labeled down, broken down into categories from transportation to hotels to food to even itinerary adjustments and flights, of course, trains. If there are boats on the trip, it breaks it down into that. And not only does it break it down into the kilograms, the actual volume, or in that case, mass, but we still sort of recognize it as volume, but it talks about the percentage. And I think that's probably the most helpful thing for the average viewer, the average guest, the average person out there wanting to understand where are the climate impacts of travel. I think a lot of people just look at vehicles and they say, oh gosh, it's the vehicles and that's it. Nothing more than that. But you'll see with 8 different categories that some things actually surprise you of in some cases how little vehicles can actually be as part of a trip in terms of an overall percentage, how little other things can be, how other things actually have an outsized percentage that you may not have expected. So I think it's a really great educational tool to create more understanding around climate issues, around carbon, because I think that knowledge base is going to be really key to us all forming this conservation culture and conservation understanding going forward. So that was a big project of kind of recalculating and redividing every one of our itineraries. Every mile that car drives has been calculated into this Carbon Clear Vision program, and it's a really big one for us. A couple other ones that they're not new programs, but they are growing programs, and they are very, very meaningful to us. One is our philanthropy, Nat Hab philanthropy. So our work with World Wildlife Fund is, of course, the lion's share of our conservation work. We are contributing, such a significant game-changing, needle-moving amount of money towards World Wildlife Fund since inception, since 2003, but also on a yearly basis, as well as our guests as well. We're talking about in the millions. In fact, since inception, our contributions directly from Nat Hab to World Wildlife Fund is something around 7 million. And our guests, being conservation advocates, whether with World Wildlife Fund prior to travel or learning about the programs through our travel, have contributed over $45 million. So this is not like
45
a scant
million.
amount. Yeah, like this is game changing. This protects areas. This saves elephants. This funds anti-poaching units. Like this is so impactful. So I wanted to start off the philanthropy section acknowledging that World Wildlife Fund are our biggest and best partners out there. That's where most of our philanthropic work goes. However, we have a smaller fund within Nat Hab that chooses in and around a dozen programs. They're very small scale. They're so small that they really tend to fly under the radar of larger conservation organizations. And we specifically seek them out because of that. These are schools in Madagascar. They're scientists in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem that might need a GPS collar for the wolf pack that they're tracking this year. It might be providing, several bikes to a small, co-op in Africa to help get them started running a business. These types of things. And I'm happy to say that our website features all of these projects since inception. Now, gosh, over 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago that we formalized this small grant process. Our website has a great list of every single project, and it's been updated with our 15 newest philanthropy projects for 2024. And those, of course, all sit at the top of that website. So I definitely encourage people to go check out our conservation section and learn more about what we've done there. I know I'm taking a long time on this question. I promise to
Keep
move faster
going.
going
No,
forward,
crushing
but
it.
so many wins, and I like to celebrate the wins because that's what gets people jazzed. I'm a very anti doom and gloom conservation
Same,
biologist, as you know
same.
well. um, Scholarships. We have given 6 scholarships out to teachers on trips throughout the year. We have focused on two of our programs, some of our larger programs, our Monarch Butterfly Teacher Program, called a scholarship grant, as well as polar bears for the first time this year. This is the first time in 2024 that we've now given 2 full ride scholarships to 2 teachers. They are both actually out of the northeast of the United States, going on one of our polar bear trips, taking those lessons, those learnings of Arctic ecology, what the town of Churchill's like, what the Arctic's like, even climate change topics, polar bear ecology and biology, learning about those things, experiencing them as they're watching polar bears roam on the tundra, coming back to their classroom and passing on that knowledge. Teaching the teachers is what we're all about there. So we gave a number of scholarships, and that program, I'm happy to say, is growing going forward too. And then the last 3 things I'm just going to quickly rattle off here. We conducted our first ever sustainability survey this year. And so some of our many time past guests probably received that survey in an email. Hopefully it didn't go to spam, but it may have. You never know. And we got an amazing response rate in the hundreds. So we can analyze those data to understand kind of like what does this idea of conservation travel do to the conservation mindset. And I'm not going to give away any more information because this is going to be part of our 2025 conservation wins as well when I do this presentation a year from now, where we actually have like detailed data to show about like, how did people change their behavior, their mindset, their storytelling and information sharing to friends as a result of a conservation travel trip with Nat Hab. It's very, very interesting data. I did a little bit of preliminary analysis, and it's incredibly encouraging. We've always looked at ecotourism, aka conservation travel, as very much a philosophy. We're inspiring people. We're leaving money in the hands of local economies. But what about the actual metrics? What about like the scientific part of it where we get data? And that's what we just did. It's really, really cool. Then talking about leaving money in the hands of local communities, I completed our phase 1 of a project. That's a hint to a multi-phase project. Not done yet, but analyzing how much of the money that NatHab pays out to all of our partners, all of our suppliers, all of the hotels and eco lodges and transportation services, how much of that stays in local economies? And the numbers are staggering. Like we're looking at over 95% of the money that we pay directly to our partners stays local, which is really, really good because that's the whole
It's
idea is that we
amazing.
want to create stakeholders out of the people we're doing business with. So when we show that these monies come to the park or the town around Ranthambore Park in India, that the same people that are making the money incentivizing tiger conservation are also increasing their livelihoods, increasing education, increasing healthcare, increasing everything. And when we can make sure that the vast majority of that money that we pay out stays right in that community, just further solidifies those stakeholders. So that's pretty awesome. And then the final thing, which is kind of like a recapture of everything I just said, is I'm so happy to have produced our second annual sustainability report, where you're going to see pretty much everything I just talked about in beautiful graphs and photos and inspirational words. So that's a great way to learn about our stuff too.
Wow, Court. That was amazing. I think it just took 10 minutes or plus talking about that, which is fantastic. But one thing that I want to just make a quick comment here before we move on. This is why, you and I work for this company, being trained conservation biologists, both you and I. It's these bigger whys that just show that this company is walking the walk and not just talking the talk, because you and I are the kind of people where we're like, if we see something where, I's are not dotted or T's are not crossed, we be like our eyebrows might raise a little bit. But no, you just went through all of this and you're the head of a lot of these projects. So thank you for your time and work. So we have a question here, and it's actually about Nat Hab philanthropy. So I would also like to know first, before getting to this one, how are the projects selected? Like, was there an application process for these projects to come in? How were they selected? And then someone is asking if they might want to also contribute to these projects that were selected by Nat Hab. Are they tax deductible if they go on there and learn more about them? So, yeah, so how are they selected? And if anybody listening also wants to contribute, can they do that?
Yeah, great questions. So how they're selected, we do have an application form. It's an online form that, in the Microsoft world, it's so doable and easy to create these very simple forms and surveys and ways of sending out a hyperlink to a rural school in Burundi, Uganda, or to, your pick, you name it, the depths of Patagonia and southern South America. So it's very, very accessible, but we want to make it, we have made the application form deliberately extremely simple. It's just 9 questions, including what's your email address, what's your organization name. So we really just have a couple questions of like, okay, what's your organization? What is your project idea or your program that you're trying to implement? How much money do you need, and what is that money specifically going to? So that's the gist of it. I don't want it to be something where you have to submit multiple rounds of grant proposals. These organizations that frankly may not have constant internet access. They may not have the time. They may not have the expertise to submit a proper grant. And that's what we're trying to do is fulfill that niche where need clearly exists, but they may not be able to get grants from other organizations because of all kind of the technicalities that might exist around larger philanthropic organizations. Um, we give a strong preference to those communities, those forests, those parks, those people, the wildlife that we go and see. So part of that, it's kind of chicken or the egg. We of course look for that in the application as we review the applications that are submitted. But we also, when we distribute the applications, we send them specifically to our partners, of which there are frankly hundreds across the world. We distribute the application to our field team, which is our expedition leaders, our field operations folks. We distribute the applications to our staff because they might know of a small organization in Borneo or in Galapagos Islands. And it's amazing how directly connected we can get to those who need our help the most. So as a result, most applications we get are from organizations that we have some thread of connection to. It might be a school on the outskirts of Ranamafana National Park in Madagascar that we don't visit per se, but maybe one day we'll get a guide that went through their education in that school. So there is that sort of thread of connection. Um, and then once it comes to us, we of course review the grants. We have a committee as part of our larger green team, just a little Nat Hab philanthropy task force, so to speak. And then we go through a couple of rounds, couple of meetings of sitting down together virtually and reviewing the applications and kind of talking about what we like, any sort of challenges, any more information we might need, projects that may not have hit the mark if we get more projects than we have funding for, projects that may have not hit the mark, but how can we help them with an application the next year, that sort of thing. And then as far as contributing, gosh, this is where like I wish I had a good easy answer here. The challenge is that we're not a philanthropy. Well, I shouldn't say that. Like we are not have philanthropy. We are not an NGO. Like we are a business, and we don't have really like an ability to take other people's money that comes to us that's not part of a trip per se, and then keep that copacetic with you know auditing and all that sort of stuff. Like we can't be the funneling organization for someone that wants to contribute. So unfortunately, like this might change honestly in future years because I've gotten this question, fortunately, thankfully, gratefully enough throughout the years that gosh, what if we did take small donations and small contributions from our travelers and from those folks that find us online. But right now, we're not set up to do that, unfortunately. So we wouldn't be able to take it and then funnel it to these organizations, nor would we be able to do any sort of tax write off. I really wish we could. Again, might be coming down the line. There are ways to do that. It just is sort of outside of our wheelhouse. Um, Now, if you wish to contribute, 100% you can. The other challenge there is that a lot of times these are truly like rural schools or small community libraries that may not have like a real clear web presence. That is growing. So if you wish to learn more about any of our philanthropic projects, Google now about, at least 70% of the time will get you to some sort of contact page or some sort of information. So yes, that is possible, but yeah, that's the one where I don't have super great news that I can't be like, oh yeah, actually we have a portal that if you click on this, we can make it happen. If we were more of a conservation NGO, it'd be a no-brainer. But this is something we just kind of do personally, and unfortunately, don't have the ability to extend to our guests as far as direct contributions.
Yeah, thanks for that
But
explanation.
there's another way you can help, even if you don't want to contribute money directly to the organization, is just spreading the word, spreading awareness. Like that's so much of what
Yes.
we do, and so much of what we hang our hat on at Nat Hab is getting information out there. If you are particularly intrigued by the Galapagos Library that we've been supporting for years, and you go to our page on Nat Hab Philanthropy that talks about the library and talks about all the great work they're doing, and you say, "Gosh, I have a friend that is really interested in providing funds to libraries and literacy and all that sort of stuff, you know, share it far and wide."
Yeah, and I love that this is now a thing because when I was with Naha previously, and now I'm back, which is just so fun and so cool that there's been, I mean, of course, WWF is incredible, and the relationship between NatHab and WWF is just amazing. But I've loved to see the increase in funding and support to the local NGOs on the ground because that's my realm as I talk a lot with the people on the ground doing the work. So to see NatHab and NatHab Philanthropy coming together and the funding, I mean, 15 projects, that's incredible. And now the scholarships as well.
Mhm.
That's really cool. It's really cool. Very impactful all the way around. So thanks for that. So everybody, yeah, go to the website and check it out and see if there's a particular project there that speaks to your heart that you could also contribute to because they all need the help. Trust me, as somebody who works directly with these type of NGOs. So, I have a question. As somebody who has not particularly done the calculations about the data, and maybe those listening also wondering how this works, how do you actually calculate carbon data? I know that this seems like a pretty like bigger question, but all of these terms get thrown around and all of these statistics get thrown around, and it's just like, what does this actually mean? Could you
Mhm.
explain that a little further? How did you get to the carbon data pages, like the nutrition facts of our carbon data? How did you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, so it is, I mean, it is a very complicated thing in some ways. Like what does a kilogram or a metric ton of carbon look like? Nobody knows. No, I'm kidding. It's that's the thing. It's like it's somewhat intangible, so that's why it's a little bit of an abstract concept. But the thing is, like, it's a very, very well researched realm, and so there are oodles of online calculators and scientific papers that basically I refer to constantly as I'm doing these calculations to say, if you drive, let's say a vehicle that has 14 miles a gallon, it's using petrol, and it drives 662 miles over the course of this itinerary, you can get down to a very, very specific level of exactly how much carbon dioxide is emitted from the atmosphere as a result of that. So the short answer is there are a lot of calculators that have been generated over the years from academic papers that have then been translated into books and publications that have been translated into easy to use online calculators. Some of them are proprietary, things that I've gleaned from the industry or made myself. But in other words, you really can plug and chug numbers and it spits out an actual amount of carbon dioxide. And it's not just for vehicles, it's for boats, it's for trains. There are calculators and data for what a hotel stay might might cost you as far as carbon emissions, and that takes into account how many rooms, what their average occupancy rate is, what their amenities are like, does it have a swimming pool or not, all these sort of energy intensive things. So yeah, there are pretty specific ways, in short, via calculators. And then I
Okay,
should say,
awesome.
when I'm going through our itineraries, I have an advantage that I very much appreciate, and that I have guided like most of these trips, so I know intimately where the variability is, right? Like if we're doing a canyons itinerary, I know that based on timing, we might be able to go to this point to have an overlook, or to this point for an overlook. And yeah, that might be a 10-mile difference. Or let's just say, hey, I'm on a photo trip and I know that they're going to appreciate this viewpoint versus this other viewpoint, or see this thing or that thing, that, oh, I have a group that loves XYZ. And so I from personal experience, I just kind of know where that flexibility is. And that's something I build into all these carbon data sheets is, what is kind of like the miscellaneous. I mean, where is the variability? It's usually about like 10% of the trip I build in. Just be like, hey, we definitely don't know each and every trip if you're going to drive 662 miles or 655 miles. But obviously, all the calculations are done and constructed with the upper range, the upper end, and then you put in that flexibility too, and you're just more than covered, more than safe.
We just right now we had a great question just pop in. Are there any resources online where if anybody wants to calculate their data, do you have anything that like websites, or if anybody wants to see what their impact is and how they could reduce it, do you have any resources for them?
I do. The very best one out there still today, if you Google UC Berkeley, so just like the university in California, UC Berkeley cool climate calculator. Throw in calculator. That'll get me more specific. It's really cool. It's a really slick calculator that goes through about 6 different tabs of your lifestyle, from everything from your house to your energy bill, to the type of food you eat, to what kind of car you drive. And yeah, it's a great calculator. It's slick. It's aesthetic. It's actually kind of fun to use because these are all in like sliders. So if you say, oh, like how much do I fly a year? If you, as you ramp that up a little bit, notch by notch, you can see your total kind of go up or go down. Oh, like I think I drive on average 50 miles a week. Oh, maybe it's 100 miles a week. And as you notch that up and down, you'll kind of see what that does to your overall impact. So yeah, UC Berkeley, cool climate calculator.
Perfect. Great timing on that question that just got sent in. So next, this is more of like a higher level or maybe a more philosophical question. So you are the chief sustainability officer, and for those that don't know, Court also has his PhD in this field. So you're highly knowledgeable in this, and and Nat Hab has a great reputation of being the leader of conservation travel. But we all know, or people have read, or there's been a lot of criticism of the tourism field. Like is it really doing better for the planet? So as you are looking forward, talking with the leadership team of NatHab and everything like that, how do you make sure, or the company, that we are doing a net positive for the planet? Because we are emitting, emissions. There is always an impact in some way. So how do you view this and making sure that we are doing the best for the planet with our operations around the world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that gets down to the core of like my ethos, like how I spend my days, how my brain works at the start of everything I do with sustainability and travel. Is it's this balance between minimizing negative impacts while maximizing positive benefits. And in order to say that travel is a net positive, you have to consider both. I think a lot of people look at sustainability and they think, well, constantly reduce impacts, constantly reduce, offset your carbon, which we do, decarbonize, reduce waste, source ethical food and sustainable seafood, and all these things. These continue to minimize their negative impact, but you can only there actually literally is a floor that you can't go below, because just frankly, by our mere existence, we're having some sort of impact. You walking to the mailbox has some sort of impact on the world. So no matter what you do, there's gonna be something there that you have to balance out. But this is where travel, I think, has this huge superpower, and then our ability to maximize positive impacts has no ceiling. So there's this floor that we're of course trying to get to, but we know we can't go underground. Like there unless we don't exist, like we are going to have some sort of impact. But there is almost no ceiling of the positive impacts we have. So I'm hyper focused on that positive, like everything we just talked about with teaching the teachers, with funding these smaller philanthropic organizations, with providing climate education. I didn't even talk about our special climate departures where we get World Wildlife Fund climate experts to teach our travelers about stuff. So there's all this huge room to grow, or at least this amount of aptitude we have, in order, not least of which is this leaving money in local economies. I think the reality is that tourism is definitely a carbon emitter, but it's important for people to understand that we are not the biggest carbon emitter. I don't want to sugarcoat any of this, but the reality is that travel and tourism is about 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. No matter how you measure it, 8% of the whole world. The majority are heating and cooling, agriculture, industry, other travel like business travel or freight travel, shipping, trade, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty, the pie is 100%, and then tourism itself is about 8%. But that still is a chunk. And so we still need to manage that. But I think it's important to understand that, what our impact is, and that if we took out tourism tomorrow, sure, we might reduce that 8% a little bit, but the reality is that tourism is the largest foreign exchange earner in the world. If tourism didn't exist, the vast majority of countries would dip well below poverty. All that they've been able to climb throughout the past 40, 50 years, they would be decimated. Tourism provides about 1 in 10 jobs in the world. So it's a really, really significant economy. So in my mind, it's not about reducing tourism at all. It's shifting tourism from, sort of a nonchalant consumptive tourism to a sustainable model. And sustainable tourism is obviously a complex term in itself, and we could spend the rest of this webinar and 10 other webinars talking about all the facets, but you kind of get all these major themes, all these major wins of 2024 are key parts of responsible travel. So it's definitely about maximizing that positive benefit. At the end of the day, the philosophy, which I aim to constantly study and get more metrics on through things like surveys, the philosophy is still just as important. And there's a saying that I love, that you cannot say what you do not love, and you cannot love what you do not know. And I think that one of our, probably the number one issue in the world today, outside of very specific targeted things like climate change or habitat loss or the biodiversity crisis, the number one threat maybe is apathy. People just not caring about things. And the best way to get people, I think, humbly, best way to get people to think and care and love polar bears is to get them to see one, to get them to talk to a friend. That friend then understands polar bears a little bit more vicariously. But truly getting people to these places, I like to think that we fill that niche of getting them to know it, then to love it, and then to save it. So it's this kind of really nice chain effect.
I think that this might be um, down the same path of thought. So, if somebody looks at the beautiful sustainability report, they're going to see that you mentioned Nat Hab films. So, why do you feel that like our video team and the films that we put together is actually part of our conservation mission and programs?
Yeah, so Nat Hab Films, I'm privileged to be on the film team. I do a lot of the brainstorming and the conceptualizing. I also get to travel with the film team. Sometimes I'm on camera, sometimes I'm behind camera filming. And I liken it, I'm not sure if the audience will be familiar with this, but Patagonia Films, Patagonia, the clothing company, they have this division where they take their earnings or profits or whatever, they invest it into activism to showcase conservation warriors, to showcase places that are imperiled. And I think we have that philosophy, we have that mentality when making these films, is that we want to do what we're doing. We're running our business, we're doing all sorts of great things by leaving money in local economies. We're also taking some of our profits and we're investing in showcasing these places around the world that need more attention. We need to talk about what's going on the Greenland ice sheet. We need to talk about what's happening in Botswana or with wolves of Yellowstone, or issues with bear conservation on the Bear Coast. In one of our I would say, grandest films to date, Polar Bear Country, talks all about what it's like to live in a remote Arctic outpost where deadly polar bears are all around you pretty much at all times. How do you live amongst them? And how has Churchill turned from a community that feared and often battled with polar bears because they do threaten life and property? How have they changed from that into now embracing polar bears as the symbol of their community, of one of their greatest, frankly, economic income streams? So these films are kind of, I mean, I hate to say it's like a way of giving back because that sounds kind of cheesy, but it is this way to provide deeper awareness and understanding about the places that we know and love. And these films, they're not, there are some that are out there that you might appear on a little ad here and there we might send to show you what a trip looks like, to kind of give you the vibe and the feeling. But the vast majority of our films, and especially those that kind of like our top tier that we're calling Nat Hab films, they're all about showcasing these places just to explain our why of saving the world through travel. So I think it's a really fantastic way to do it. It's a heck of a lot of fun, of course, and it solves this really interesting extra element that I've kind of grappled with for the last couple of years. There's this great quote from Alexander von Humboldt that says, "The most dangerous worldview is a worldview from someone who has not viewed the world." And I mean, I think
Beautiful.
that is a great explanation as to why we do what we do. But the reality is that not everybody can travel, whether it's time, whether it's physical ability, whether it's a financial thing, whether it's just a comfort level thing. But I think media holds this really, really special place where you don't have to get in a plane, a boat, and a train and hike up a mountain to go see XYZ, snow leopards, tigers, whatever. You can see and experience and learn and be inspired from this from your own home, from your own iPad, from wherever you are. And what it does, I think it gives people a slice of that worldview that goes to that saying that they might otherwise not have. So I think it kind of, not have films really imbue all those things together, I think, in such a grand way.
Yeah, I love it just feels more inclusive. Like not everybody can travel with us, but we can take you with us to these places, you know? Yeah, I love them. They're beautiful. Yeah, your team, good job to the film team. They're beautiful films. And just as a sneak peek to everybody, I'm working on actually doing video premieres with our video team to showcase them, and you all will be the first to see them. So I'm working on it. We have a lot of cool webinars planned for 2025. So I think this is a perfect time to ask, what are you working on for 2025? What is the goals or projects that you're doing?
Yeah, so 2025, I expect it to be another banner year for conservation travel. Obviously this whole maximizing positive benefit thing, I want to start with that because the coolest thing about doing what we do, conservation through exploration, as a conservation first company, really, is that just by getting travelers to these destinations, we're probably having some of the biggest impact we can possibly have. We are growing philanthropy, we are growing scholarships. We're adding more grants, more teacher scholarships. But the reality is, just by growing and adding new destinations, getting more travelers each and every year, all those big metrics like the largest foreign exchange earner, the largest source there, that's we're going to help grow that. The fact that 1 in 10 jobs worldwide is in tourism, we're going to help grow that, even our little small piece to play. So I certainly want to start with that, is just by growing as a company and doing more trips and going to more places, we're we're directly creating these stakeholders in local communities. There's also the kind of not opposite, but maybe reciprocal side of that, of our travelers themselves. So, our travelers are the influencers of our world. They're the people storytelling, they're the people sharing photos and experiences with friends and family. This is a great time of year to do so, as you're sitting around a fire and talking about the last time you saw a snow leopard or came face to face with a mountain gorilla. And so again, inspiring travelers is such a huge, huge thing. Now, those are big topics, right? And that's not necessarily my day-to-day work. So some of the day-to-day things I can see happening in 2025, I hinted at this expansion of this local, I'm calling a local impact rating, where we directly analyze how much money is left in local economies. We're going to be completing that study, I should say, with phase 2 and phase 3 of that project. And I hope by this time next year, we'll have final results on, essentially every trip we do with an individual score rating, like, hey, this trip to the Cotswolds or this trip to canyons or this trip to Galapagos leaves 96% of money in local economies, 97% in local economies, 92% in local economies. So that's a really exciting project. It's a big one, but I think it's a great way, once again, to sort of parlay that philosophy into direct numbers and direct benefit. I am very excited about reporting data on the sustainability survey, like I said. We're going to be making a lot of headway into science-based targets. So that's not just rolling out more electric vehicles. We have a couple going online in East Africa, in Tanzania, and in Kenya. We're hoping to possibly have a lead on one in Costa Rica coming up soon, but also finalizing our actual plan for the next 6 years of decarbonization across all of our Scope 1 and Scope 2, 3 emissions. So for anybody interested in getting involved, SBTI is a lengthy and intensive process. It's a multi-year process, but it's going to be a big year for SBTI. But then, like I said, we are growing philanthropy. I can't wait to see what our next round of applications look like. We've expanded our Monarch Scholarship Program to add 2 more teachers. In fact, they're departing on a Monarch trip, I believe, next week, which is very exciting. And so just the ripple effects there are just, it's so exciting to see, because although we kind of know what we're going to get, there are always these really interesting kind of spin-offs where someone will have been on the trip with these teacher scholars and they say, hey, I have an organization that could do a very, very similar thing. And then they talk to me, they work with me, and they spin their own teacher scholarship program. This happened just a couple of years ago. So you kind of plant the seed, and it's exciting to see what grows from all that. And then, of course, wrapping all this stuff as well as many more things into our next sustainability report. Believe it or not, we're already starting that process of writing and outlining and conceptualizing. And like we always say, it's gonna be the best ever. It's gonna be the best yet. The third.
Wow, you have your work cut out for you. That's
Hmm.
definitely for sure, Court. And since you are also so tapped into this realm, this world, the sustainability, tourism, and leading the way and really coaching pretty much everyone on how to do this the right way, do you foresee or have the seeds been planted of certain trends that you think is going to happen in tourism in 2025 or that you hope to? What do you think we're going to see as the industry as a whole for tourism?
Yeah. So, as far as tourism goes, there are, of course, some trends with like destinations, what places are growing, what places have piqued the interest of travelers. One that we see repeatedly in Outside Magazine and Travel and Leisure and Nat Geo and all these publications that truly have their finger on the pulse, is Greenland. Greenland is one of these areas that I think is becoming incrementally more accessible. We're fortunate enough to have our own base camp in East Greenland, which is a very, very remote part of a very, very remote landmass. West Greenland is where 56,000 people live, and East Greenland is where 2,000 of those total population live. And so, the ability for us to get people out in the backcountry there is a really, really exciting thing. But that's kind of speaking as far as, tourism in general. I think certain destinations will definitely continue to rise. But I think as far as sustainable travel, probably what I'm seeing is that doing things sustainably is no longer a nice to have, it's kind of a need to have. And that's actually something that a colleague said to me, not a Nat Hab colleague, but someone else in the industry, just sort of observing what's happening. This is someone from academia. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more companies joining in on some of this activism, some more of the storytelling. We are so proud to have been the world's first 100% carbon neutral travel company since 2007. And still to this day, I get travel companies reaching out to me and saying, well, how can we offset just part of our portfolio? How can we get into advanced technologies like direct air capture? Direct air capture being truly machines that are based around the world, sucking air out of the atmosphere, removing the carbon dioxide, and then returning the quote unquote clean air to the atmosphere. So as we see, more companies buying into the concept of sustainable travel, I think there's gonna be more investment in these novel technologies like direct air capture. I think sustainable aviation fuel is I was gonna say about to take off, but I was gonna reserve the puns for later. Um, Sustainable aviation fuel is something that it's still a very small percentage of the overall airline fuel out there. But even if you could go from, let's say, 2% of 4%, that's actively doubling each and every year. So that'd be very, very exciting to see. I think at Nat Hab specifically, whether it's through our Nat Hab films, whether it's through our other storytelling channels, even social media is a fantastic storytelling channel to reach mass audiences. I think getting involved in more advocacy that is near and dear to our hearts. One that we've been pretty focused on in the last couple of years has been in Alaska along the Bear Coast. And there was this mining operation that was threatening not only a good size of the bear population in Alaska, but also the largest fishery in the United States in Bristol Bay. And that was called the Pebble Mine. You may have heard of it from us. But through a couple of years of advocacy and awareness building, through email campaigns and websites and stories and blogs and webinars just like this Pebble Mine concept has essentially been put to rest. It's dead. It's like it's not progressing. It's been more or less vetoed. However, we're seeing other similar concerning things pop up. The most recent is a proposition from the um, I think it's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or it's at least the local sort of Alaska Board of Game, is Proposition 75 to increase bear and wolf culling along this Bear Coast
Mm.
area. So it's to say this is not my time to get on a soapbox and necessarily talk about that specific proposition, but this idea that we will win battles, but there will be more battles to be fought. And I think that we have this excellent voice. We have amazing footage and storytelling ability through film and through speaking, word of mouth, through travel to actually see and know and love these places to then save them. That getting more involved in those issues that directly threaten the places that we travel to is kind of something I see us really moving towards heavily.
Yeah, and if anybody, hopefully you were able to tune in when I sat down with Jennifer from the NPCA about Johnson Tract Mine, because that
Mm.
was another big one in Alaska that was affecting Lake Clark National Park and everything like that. So that is a great one. If anybody wants to watch that replay, let me know. It's on our YouTube channel. It's on the website in the conservation program. Conservation like tab of the Daily Dose homepage, or you can email webinars at nathab.com and I'll send it to you. But that was a great example of like using this to be like, hey, like we have to stop this mine. It's affecting bears. It is affecting our camp. Like there's like a real stake in this. Like we just, yeah, man, Alaska, over and over and over. It's definitely a strong topic that we chat a lot about. So one of the last questions I want to ask you, Court, is obviously not everybody, we're all adventurous at heart. Not everyone is going to take all of their trips with Nat Hab. We don't offer the entire world of trips or portfolios or different types of everything. So, if somebody listening is planning a trip soon to another destination or maybe looking at other companies that go to places we don't go, what are some tips that maybe if someone's looking at companies that they should look for or great recommendations that you might have to make sure that we as travelers are doing the best that we can to be sustainable when we're making our choices?
Yeah, that's a great one. I love talking about that. So my first bit of advice is kind of a two-parter, but it starts with a really, really easy but very powerful technique, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's just simply ask whomever you're working with, whether it's a travel company, whether it's a hotel or an eco lodge or an activity you're booking or a guide service, whatever that business is, just simply get into the discussion of sustainability with them. And you can ask them, this is, I always just say this is like the easiest question to ask that has the biggest pound for pound impact is, what is your position on sustainability? You in the audience, by asking that, don't have to be an expert on sustainability. You're just asking a question. What is your position on it? That just means talk about it. What are you doing? How do you feel about it? How do you think about it? What actionable steps have you taken or do you plan to take? Very, very open-ended. But this does a couple of things. One is it allows you to compare, of course, apples to apples, apples to watermelons. And the second part of that is to put your money towards the more sustainable companies, right? If you give your money to the people that are doing the work you want to see done, that's going to get them to grow. That's going to have them do a bigger impact. That's going to have them be more sustainable in whatever country they're operating. So I think that's a really, really powerful way. But I want to backtrack there because it's not always about just, paying for the more sustainable option. there are a lot of companies out there, or there are a lot of trips that people in the audience might be taking where, let's say they are looking at two itineraries or two companies, or they're just looking at one company and they're like, I'm not going to change companies. They have exactly what I want. Just by asking that question, even if they don't have a good answer, even if it's a bad answer, is you're showing them that it matters. And what happens is if everybody in the audience here does this, and you tell your friends to do it, and then I do a webinar like this in a year from now, or I do some other things in the meantime, and I get a bunch of following, and all these people, it's the first question or the fifth question they ask when searching for a trip. It's going to create a market trend. And so that person on the phone or the email is going to make a mental note or maybe a literal note about all these people asking about, wow, this is the fourth person this month that's asked what our position on sustainability is. And they're going to take that to their manager. And manager is going to take it to the executive team. And executive is going to take it to the board. And all of a sudden they're saying, holy cow, we've had 400 people just this year alone ask what our position in sustainability is. And we don't have one. Maybe we should make one. And that's where big change happens. So it's not just about, putting your money where you want to see the change. It's about just simply asking the question. There's no harm, no foul. You can't go wrong with it because it just starts a conversation. You're not telling the person, hey, unless you're really sustainable, I'm gonna take my money elsewhere. You're just saying, what's your position on it? And I think it creates that market trend. I think it's a really, really easy but very meaningful, powerful thing to do. And then the other big thing with how to travel more sustainability or sustainably is to kind of showcase your sustainable practices. So I have a little kind of running list of things that people can bring with them on trips that reduce your negative impact. Right, like you can bring a reusable water bottle. If you think you'll be drinking coffee on the trip, bring a little reusable mug. I like to bring a little mesh laundry bag with me if I plan on doing laundry, so I don't have to use those plastic ones in hotel rooms. I even go as far to bring like a little camping spork. It's like a little thing that you would take camping, so that way I don't have to crack into those single-use things in airports. And yeah, they're kind of pains in the butt. Like I get it. Like it's something you got to tote around with you, and it's something you got to wash. But it does two things. One, it minimizes your impact. Great. But more importantly, when people in the airport see you with a nice piece of cutlery, or it might be a bamboo set, it might be just a cool looking spork that has cool graphics or colors to it, is they're gonna say, "Wow, I've seen like three or four of these in this airport alone. Maybe I should get one. Maybe I'm missing the boat here." And again, like you can kind of see where my mindset is. It's influencing this culture of conservation. And so by showcasing your sustainability, not only are you reducing the negative impacts by using a plastic water bottle or cracking in these little single use cutlery packets, but you're showing other people it's easy, it's doable, and in many cases it's nicer. It's actually a nicer experience for the person using, you know, a real fork, or something that you have grown to love. So I think, showcasing that sustainability is a huge one. And then I guess sort of coupled with that, but also last point here is, telling people about your experience. We talked about this in the storytelling and the worldview and this idea of influencing the influencers. I think that telling people about where you went and what you did is very natural to us. And, sometimes you might feel that it's like a little bit braggadocious or whatever, but the reality is by showing your photos, you're helping that animal. By showing your photos, you're helping that community, you're helping tourism, you're helping conservation. So one thing you can do during the trip to kind of set you up for that post-trip success is just making little conservation notes. If you go with a great, conservation or sustainably minded company, your guide or your pre-trip materials are going to have those notes. If you like posting on social media or writing a blog or creating a photo album or a calendar, just jot down two or three little notes about conservation and pair those with the stories you tell, pair those with the photos you share. And then a colleague of mine had a great tip that it was under my nose the whole time, but I never thought about it, is when you're in the field and you're actually having these profound experiences wherever you're at, is just take out your iPhone and your little voice recorder and just talk about what you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you're learning, what you're experiencing in the moment. And I've done that recently, just in the last like month or so, and it is a profound difference to capturing my words in the moment. Like I'm not the kind of person to take out a laptop when I'm in the safari vehicle or bring a notepad and write 10 paragraphs about exactly what's happening. I want to be looking, I want to be photographing. But the voice recorder, it captures your emotion, it captures so much in a very quick, easy way. And then you have that that feeling as well as the words after the fact that you can then storytell with. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And that's always there. We always have our phone with us, just recording those like authentic, genuine moments and also going back and listening to them. Then you relive it every single time. So that's great. We did just get a fantastic question. Speaking of traveler to-dos or like, actions that we can do you know of any like gear rental or resale or repair programs that if someone doesn't want to go out spend a ton of money on new gear, or if they're like I'm only going to do this trip or this type of, maybe they're going to like Antarctica or polar bears or something, and but they live in Florida, like they're not going to ever use that stuff again. So are there any tools online that people can use to get the gear for a particular trip but not necessarily buy it or repair it, any of those resources?
Yeah, well, I'll start off with a great company that will repair and will consistently uphold a lifelong warranty of things. And this is back to Patagonia. They not only make great,
Mm-hmm.
you know, adventure gear like hiking pants and parkas and base layers and long underwear and mittens and all that, but they also make luggage, suitcases, backpacks. And I have to say, like, I've been using them for many, many years, these guys, and if something rips, if a zipper pulls off, if the wheel breaks in your suitcase, you can send it back to them and they will repair it and they will send it back to you very, very, very often with no fee. And so it's an amazing way. Like we all like new stuff, we all like new things, and there's technology improves and all that. But it is truly a way. If you're wanting to invest in one suitcase for the rest of your life, you can get away with it with Patagonia. So that I don't think that was like the center of your question, but I wanted to give them a shout out because they're a great company doing that. And there are other companies that do that. Eagle Creek is another one that's fantastic. And if you start looking into like warranties and replacement, start looking at online reviews, Osprey backpacks, very similar thing. These lifetime warranties mean that you don't have to dip back into the construction of these materials, to the construction of the backpack or the suitcase. It's so much less environmentally intensive to repair something you already have, to wash it, to fix it, to sew it, than to go start from scratch and make it all anew again. So that's a huge thing. As far as like gear rental, I definitely know what you mean. So, I mean, quick shout out to Nat Hab. If you are going on one of our polar adventures, we're going to give you loaner gear as part of that. Like, so truly, I live in Florida, and when I go guide a polar bear trip, I very often use the parkas we have because they're great. We source really high quality products. And so you don't have to buy the snow boots or the parkas or anything like that. But still, I think the key part of your question is like, is there some website where you can go and they'll send you gear before any trip around the world? I do not know of one, but I do know that there are a lot of services that are very location specific. Meaning, if you're going to Iceland and you want to get some great gear that prevents rain, and well, there's no gear that prevents rain. There's gear that prevents you getting wet from rain or wind. Like I noticed walking along like the main street right there, there's like one or two companies that literally will rent you the gear. Now you pick it up upon arrival, so they're not going to ship it from Iceland to New Jersey and then you fly over to Iceland and then all that. So they definitely exist, but right now what I've seen is the model is such that when you arrive in the place, that's when you can pick up your stuff and get your gear. And I think really the best thing to do, since I don't have like a specific company name to give you that solves all these problems, I think you just Google it, like Iceland parka rental, and I promise you that you'll find a lot of options out there.
Yeah, and the same goes for like camera gear. If anybody wants to rent cameras, there's always that. Lenses.
Mhm.
Um, Another one I wanted to throw out there too, like REI, they have like a pretty cool resale program too of a lot of their gear. So that's a good one. I've actually gotten some stuff from them, some like button up clothes for the field. I've gotten from their like resale um, program there.
Mhm.
So, Court, it's absolutely wild, but we have reached the end of the webinar already. I swear I could talk to you for so, so long.
Well, it's a pleasure.
So, but yeah, the last question I would like to ask you then is what is the best way for people to find and hear updates about what you're up to, what NatHab is up to when it comes to our conservation and sustainability initiatives and projects?
Yeah, frankly, the easiest, best way is to sign up for Nat Hab's e-news. This is going to keep you posted on all of our happenings and all of our whereabouts. It's going to give you some upcoming trip information, but also when we have news to share, like we just published our 2024 sustainability report, you're going to get an email on that because we're very, very proud to share. When we have a roundup of our 15 philanthropy programs for the year, you're going to get an email on that. So that's like the quickest, easiest is to make sure you're part of the e-news. The next thing is probably to keep tabs. You can bookmark it. You can just peruse it after this webinar, but is to go to nathab.com/conservation. And it's a one-stop shop for just about everything we're doing with conservation, from scholarships to philanthropy to our carbon removal and reduction strategies. We really like to put our best foot forward, our most comprehensive foot forward on the website. So that's probably the best place to go to get a one-stop shop. We always keep it updated. We're always revamping it. We're always adding news. So between e-news and either bookmarking or at least browsing that website, I would certainly do so. Or frankly, if you do email us at info@nathab.com, you'll be linked with someone in our team, and you can start asking them like, hey, would you mind letting me know anytime you get new sustainability stuff that comes through, or any conservation tidbits? And that person will happily do that as new information comes through, either directly from me or just news from our company in general. So yeah, a few different avenues there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Court, thank you for everything that you do for not only Nat Hab, but the planet as a whole. So, very much appreciate taking the time to sit down with me today for all of us. And yeah, and if everyone you have any questions, feel free to check us on the website or email in. But again, thank you, Court. And I'd also
Thank
like
you.
to thank everyone who tuned in today. Join us tomorrow, New Year's Eve, if you would like to have some more daily dose in your life. We will be having a webinar tomorrow, and you can check out what we're presenting tomorrow as well as the end of the week, and the registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record this presentation, and I will make sure you all have the replay available on our website and, of course, in email. And with that, Court, I will conclude the webinar.
Thanks, Brooke.
Goodbye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
It was a great day.